thank you, Deborah. I've changed my bio since. I call myself a simple country lawyer. That sort of says it all, as we all are, simple, country folks who are just making a living in the community that we love. Well, the interesting story about how this topic came together, Deborah reached out to my marketing person, Jason Versace, and she said, do you know which Bob would like to speak to our group on the topic of zoning? So Jason gave me a call. I said, sure. And he, of course, said to Deborah, sure. And then Jason at one point said to me, Bob, I didn't think you knew anything about zoning. And I said, I don't. But when the lawyer doesn't know what they're talking about, they find people who know what they're talking about. And I'm sure you all do that also. So it came to mind. I said, well, who in the community probably knows a lot about zoning issues, comes across her desk quite often, none other than Josephine Beckman. Josephine Beckman is the district manager of Community Board 20, and for those of you who don't know what a Community Board 10, I'm sorry, I'm confusing it with my school board days. Community Board 10, Community Board is where a local resident has direct access to their government to either complain about something that's going on in their community that they don't like, or to say, I'd like to see this happen in my community. I'd like to see another park. I'd like to see more parking. I'd like to see this, that, and more schools and this. And this is where a resident has a direct input into their government. It's a pretty unique concept, and Josephine is the district manager and listens to both complaints and recommendations for things that go on in the community. Then I thought, who else should we have on this panel? And Adam Friedman. Adam and I met a while back at a networking event, and Adam lives in Bay Ridge and is a developer, and of course comes across the topics of zoning whenever he decides to put the shovel in the ground. What can I build, from the ground up? And Adam also said to me, Bob, I don't know that much about zoning myself either, but he said to me, I know who to ask when I have a zoning question. He goes right up the ladder, either through the community board or through architects or through law firms that specialize in zoning. Well, I'd like to give you a little background of zoning, and then Josephine will have a little presentation. Adam will say a few things, and then we'll open it up to questions. I looked on the city website about their definition of zoning, and it says, zoning is the language of the physical city. It aims to promote an orderly pattern of development and to separate incompatible land uses such as industrial versus homes to create a pleasant living environment. Zoning is a legal instrument that regulates and establishes limits on the use of land, building size, shape, and height. So about a century ago, 1916, zoning really kicked into high gear in New York City. And why? Because back then there was a building that still stands now, the Equitable Building in Lower Manhattan. The Equitable Building at that time was one of the biggest buildings in New York City. It was a city block square, big rectangular building. And after they built it, after everybody said, wow, this is a beautiful building, they said, geez, it's so dark on the street here. What happened to the sun? I can't even see the sky anymore. And people started complaining that these monolithic buildings were destroying, people's enjoyment of the sun, fresh air, and the sky, walking on the street. So zoning regulations started to kick in, and as a result of that square rectangular building, the city started to say, if you're going to build a big building, you got to let the sun hit the ground also. And as a result of those regulations coming into play, they started to build buildings that had that tapered effect on the top of the building. And the most distinguished building that they built in that area was the Chrysler Building. And how beautiful is that building with, I think, the copper or the metal top to it, but it is tapered back. Come forward to today, those concepts still apply, but buildings may not be tapered. One way of achieving the similar result is to build some low-rise buildings around the ground and then build your square building a little further back. So it achieves both that ability to have fresh air, sunshine on the ground. So zoning is as you know, zoning is an ever-changing situation. And fast forward to today, applying it to Brooklyn and parts of New York City, zoning has morphed into a political tool to force developers to build what we call affordable, what they call affordable housing. The city is saying to developers, if you want to build a big building, well, part of that better be affordable for the local people to live in. So the government is now using zoning, not so much to get sunlight and fresh air and sky views on the ground. They're using it as a social tool to allow middle and lower income housing. And then to bring zoning really here locally, we all know what 4th Avenue used to look like going down to Atlantic Avenue. Well, that's changed dramatically. Zoning was changed there about 20 years ago, and now that whole corridor in Park Slope, Sunset Park, has all high-rise condominium buildings, and people are wondering how fast that's going to impact in Bay Ridge. And in Bay Ridge, zoning issues come up in a variety of ways. I know Fran Vella-Marone is involved with situations where people are buying houses and gutting them and putting in dozens of people living in the household. Well, that's sort of a zoning issue. You can't have multi-family housing in what is otherwise a 1 or 2 family house. And we all know that another issue popping up in Bay Ridge is there are a few vacant lots and there are a few existing buildings, and some developers are deciding that because of certain zoning requirements that they're allowed to build higher than normal sized buildings. So that's one of the impacts that zoning is having in Bay Ridge. So zoning is an ever-changing situation, and whenever anyone has a question in the community about zoning, the first person they usually ask is Josephine.
That's true.
Beckman.
That's